welcome. All right, let's just jump into this. All right, so that was one of the jam nights I was at there, just doing an improvised jam, playing AC/DC's Rocker. So that was just kind of a really didn't know where to end the song, so we just kind of went on and on, but it was pretty cool, pretty fun, and I did a bit of a Chuck Berry kind of stuff, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was a fun performance, and that was my 61 reissue. The first time and only time I've actually played it on stage. I've jammed with people with it, but I've never played it on stage because I always considered it a guitar that you didn't take out to jam nights and stuff like that, just because of the cost of them. And that was played through a little Fender Junior tube amp, a little 10-watt tube amp. The same thing that previous video where you saw me playing that Squire Strat. You could hear the gain difference between the two guitars with that humbucker sound of the SG and the between the single coil and those classic 57s, which I think is probably one of my favorite pickups of all time. For a classic rock sound, that kind of stuff. For metal, they're a little bit muddy for metal, but for cleans and for tubed rock, yeah, they really kick ass on that. But anyway, that was a really fun night. So the topic of today is, oh, sorry, I'm a little stiff because I was up on roof breaking ice like a freaking caveman, just bashing ice off the top of this roof. But anyway, so there's a story for another time. But yeah, get comfy here. Okay, so yeah, the topic of today is something you should never ever do as a musician. Never ever ever play for musicians. So what am I talking about? Okay, guy walks into a bar. Ow, you think you would have noticed? No, not that kind of bar. The bar you drink at. So he goes into the bar, he goes up on stage, he grabs his guitar, and he pulls it out of the case, he plugs it into the amp, and he strums a couple of chords, and people cheer, and he's like, he's doing really well, he thinks he's doing the best, and all of a sudden another guitar player shows up, and he gets on stage, and he pulls his guitar out of the case, and he plugs it into his amp, and he blows the first guitar player away, because he plays much better, and the first guitar player gets intimidated. You see what I did there? Kind of a cheap effect, but anyway. Okay, this has happened to people probably more often than not. So I'll be talking a little bit about guitars. I don't want to make everything just about guitars, because I mean, music is more than just about the obsession of guitars. Although I'm quite obsessed with guitars, but sometimes when you play live, especially when you're newer to playing live and stuff like that. Like I've done hundreds of shows. I've done probably played about 275 shows with bands, like full shows, 3 sets, 2 sets, opening act, whatever, that kind of stuff, where you're on stage for anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, plus, in between breaks and whatever. Probably done a couple of hundred jam night open stage stuff, whatever. And when you first start out, you can get intimidated very easily. And what happens is you get on stage and you jam with somebody, and that person is better than you. They've got more knowledge. They're just a better player. They've got better equipment, whatever. And sometimes it can actually harm your performance in the sense of that because you're intimidated, you just kind of you feel bad about yourself, right? And this I've noticed at jam nights, where somebody who's never played before gets on stage, it's their first jam night, whatever, and then the person behind them comes up and that's what they pretty much either do for a living, or they've been on, they're just so comfortable on the stage that they just blow them out of the water. And then you can reflect on, okay, how do I get to that level? That's fine, but what happens is people sometimes get, well, I'm not going to play live anymore. People are going to, do that to me, kind of thing, and they're not doing that to you. You know what I mean? Like, don't take it personally if somebody goes on stage after and gets more cheers. It's one of those things that I've noticed people do that, where they take it to personal, because they didn't sound as good or get as many cheers. Like maybe you played even phenomenally well and better than the person after you, but the person after you gets more cheers because you know the audience has more friends in the audience or something. You never know what it is. I do notice this with like when you go to a jam, like you'll always have locals there, right? And those locals, everybody hoots and hollers for them because they've seen them 10 weeks in a row. You know what I mean? Um, but you'll also notice too, if you go to the same jam night, people tend to play the same repertoire for years on end. So they play the same 3 or 4 songs over and over again. Maybe they have like a nine or 10 songs, but within 3 weeks, you'll have heard every song they know, and they'll be phenomenally good at these songs because that's all they play. Whereas one compliment I always get is, especially from the host of the jam night that I normally go to, which I hopefully will be going to again in the spring. Only made it out once in 2022, and I was just like, like my truck broke down for 4 months, and it was just, whatever. I was looking forward to a whole season of it, right? But one thing I always kept getting was, and it wasn't just him, but the guy's name was Greg, and anyway, he always goes every time you come here, he goes, you play something different. He goes, how many songs do you know? He goes, you have a huge repertoire. He goes, how many songs do you know? Because I mean, this guy's the host of the jam night most of the time, so almost everybody he sees on stage, particularly i.e. the locals, play the same songs. Within it, like I say, 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to hear the same songs again. And not that they do a bad job; they do a phenomenal job at the songs. So they play these songs so often that the crowd will sing along, they'll cheer, because they know the song, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, he plays this all the time. He does really well at it, right? But me, I go up there and I'll play a song that I know nobody in the bar has ever heard before. I'll play like Evoluti songs. You probably don't even know the Evoluti songs, right? I played Call of the Mountain. I played some Nightwish songs like Nemo and stuff like that. Sabaton songs, like in acoustic, of course, and some of them on the mandolin. So nobody's ever heard these songs, so they're not going to sing along because they don't know the song, the words, and they've never heard it before. But sometimes too, people will just sit there and stare, right? Because they're like, "Hey, this is new. I got to pay attention." Where if it's a song they know, they tend to kind of not really tune out, but they'll sing along whatever because it's a no-brainer, right? But when you play something that people haven't heard before, that usually catches their attention, and sometimes people will sit there quiet, staring at you. And for some musicians, they might not understand what I'm about to say, but they'll get it at some point. Is if the room is completely dead quiet, keep doing what you're doing. If the room is okay, you're playing, and you can hear people talking and laughing and all that. That's fine too. They'll definitely clap when you're done, whatever. But if you play and the room goes quiet, chances are people are just dialed right into what you're doing. I'd love to have a night where everybody was like engaged with what I'm playing. You know what I mean? It never happens where everybody is engaged with what you're playing, but you can get some better nights than others, right? And sometimes you just don't have a responsive audience. Like they're just not into it. They're just not that into you, man. But you still always play the best you can. You know what I mean? Play as if everybody in front of you is your biggest fan, whether they don't know you or not. Doesn't matter. But just pretend that, because you really want to do the best show you can. But the whole play for musicians thing, here's what I'm saying. Most people will clap. Most people will cheer. Most people come and say, "Awesome job, man. That was great. I really enjoyed that." Even if they're not very expressive at the time when you're playing it. I've had people come up to me weeks later and go, "Oh, that mandolin thing you did, that was so cool." Or, "Hey, that guitar, that red guitar you had there, wow, that thing was smoking hot. It was what a great sound." But when you saw them in the audience, it was kind of like they weren't paying attention to you at all. But you don't realize how much they were enjoying it, right? So you never make the assumptions that people, how they're going to react to it. You just give it your all. You know what I mean? But when it comes to musicians, when you're on the stage and you're looking out over the crowd of people, you can always spot the musicians by how they fold their arms while they leer at you. And if it's guitar players, I remember, because some of the places I used to play, There was a bar called Roxanne's Bar and Grill. Previously, it was called the Papillon. This place doesn't exist anymore, but it was a big time rocker bar in Hull, Quebec, kind of like the equivalent to the Roxy in L.A., but over my neck of the woods, right? And like I say, there was people like Ingve played there, Megadeth played there. It wasn't the biggest bar at all. It was a quite average sized bar. But the stage was really cool, and they had a 13,000 watt PA system, which might not sound like a lot, but there was speakers in every nook and cranny of the bar. So no matter where you went, you heard the band really well, and it just whenever you would hit a chord, it was just like a wall of you. It was very epic, and you would get all these like really guitar player types in there. Now there's a study that came out. I didn't read it, but it was something along the lines of that guitar players play for other dudes to impress other dudes. They don't do it to like we always joke that I'll play this just to impress the chicks, but the chicks typically aren't really that impressed by guitar players. Like, sorry to burst people's bubbles, but they're more into the song than they are the guitar. Like if you say, okay, go up to the average girl, hey, what do you think about this band? And they'll say, oh yeah, I like this band, or I don't like this band. What do you think about Guns N' Roses? Oh, I love Slash. He's an awesome guitar player, because they know Slash, right? Okay, yeah, but how do you like Al Di Meola? Do you like Al Di Meola? And they'll be like, like, is that like a new gender? Demi what? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so like guitar players know guitar players, but the rest of the people usually don't. So, but most guitar players, especially the shredder guys, they're shredding and stuff like that to show it becomes like a rite of passage, right? It's like, okay, I am the alpha at my fretboard, and it becomes one of those things where like if you look at the band like Polyphia, I can't even pronounce that. They're very technical. They did a thing with Steve Vai and all that. It was really cool. Like guitar players can get into that. The average person not going to get into that. Why? It's too much. Like it's too. Most people can't even understand classical music. You know what I mean? Like they can't get into it because it's the odd tempos and stuff like that. Most people need like 3-chord rock, and then like ease on from there. Like you get the odd person that can like get into it, and metal is like, especially progressive metal. Like if you take somebody like say Periphery, Dream Theater, stuff like that, Rush, whatever. Those were really bands that were like party bands, right? They're a lot more. They're very technical, especially John Petrucci. Guitar players know who he is. You mention his name, to the average person, they're not going to know, right? So the guitar players judge other guitar players, and no matter what you do, let's say you were as good as Ingve, right? You were as, or Paul Gilbert. Let's say you could play riff like young Paul Gilbert, kind of like Racer X stuff. Let's say you do Frenzy. If you've ever heard Frenzy by Racer X, Paul Gilbert, it's the most ferocious picking you'll ever hear. It sounds like he is murdering those strings, and it's at light speed. I don't know how Paul Gilbert does not have like tendonitis and carpal tunnel and stuff like that, because his techniques, and to his own admission, he said his techniques were really bad. Like how he was able to get that pick to move that fast. He would do a weird thing with his thumb, the way he was holding his pick. He said his hands would burn. And back then they did think of Paul Gilbert, how musical genius he is. And yet a guy like him had bad technique. Even Ingve has some bad techniques. I know I'm blasphemy of the gods here, but hear me out. But like their style, like Ingve's right hand is dead on. But look at his left hand. He plays like Jimi Hendrix. He's got like slanted fingers. whatever. Now you get a guy that's not very well known, but a really like technically correct type of guy like Brent. I don't know if you've checked out his channel or not. If you haven't, and you're a guitar player. If you're a new guitar player, I don't recommend him because he's a little too advanced for the beginners. But he's all about the technique and whatever, making sure that your hands don't, keeping your hands safe so that you don't end up getting carpal tunnel or stressing your hands to the point where you end up carpal tunnel and tendonitis and all that horrible things that wreck a guitar player's playing abilities, right? But anyway, yeah, let's say you could play to those levels, and you were like shredding like Racer X levels with Paul Gilbert. You would still have a guitar player in the audience saying, "Well, he's not that good. He sucks." Because guitar players do have kind of fragile egos. They do. I was never one of those guys. I can, play the really easy pentatonic stuff like you heard at the beginning of the beginning of the video. 3-chord rock stuff. That's all it was. It was a jam night, right? 3-chord rock work. It rules on a jam night because you got to keep it simple, stupid. But you can see, good is good. If it sounds good, it is good. Ingve said that. If it sounds good, it is good. Who am I to question Ingve, right? But that said, the average person that's not a player is going to basically listen to it, and if it sounds good, it is good. They're not going to care if you played your pentatonic lick perfectly. They're not going to care if you're playing Neapolitan, licks versus pentatonic licks. They're not going to care because they don't know the difference anyway. The guitar players, usually the more educated a guitar player is in his theory, usually the more anal retentive he gets about the players. So this guy sucks, that guy sucks, that guy sucks. But when that guy goes up on stage, he's really not as good as he criticizes. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm like, I've never understood that kind of rivalry or jealousy or whatever it is. And it's like, when you're on stage, the only thing you should be really concerned about is your audience. That's it. And hopefully your gear's working good. That's the only things you should be really concerned about. And for me, that's always what it's been about. I don't play to impress guitar players because, number one, you're probably not going to be able to do it anyway. And number two, there's a broader audience there. So play to the best of your abilities, whatever. But don't be intimidated by. I'll give you an idea. When I was young and just kind of starting out on the electric guitar, I walked into what used to be known as Songbird Music. Now it's called Spaceman Music in Ottawa. And I walk into there, and right on the wall it said, "No Stairway to Heaven, no Crazy Train, no Sweet Child of Mine." Like, just don't play that in the store because everybody goes in there and like every time a new song like that would come out, guitar players would go in the store and grab every guitar off the wall and play the same lick over and over. Some would play it better than others, right? Well, anyway, so you go in there and you noodle around on the guitar, do anything except for sometimes, because some of the guitar stores like Steve's and stuff, I knew all the guys there, and I'd go in there, I'd start doing Smoke on the Water and then Crazy Train. I'd go through all of them until they'd yell at me, right? They're like, okay, and they knew I did it on purpose, so it was a big joke, right? And yeah, and they'd be like, yeah, more. But I used to get a kick out of it. But anyway, I walk in, okay. I grab a guitar, start noodling around it. My buddy grabs a guitar, he starts noodling around, and we're okay players. This guy walks in with a cast on his right hand, and he looks like a hair metal guy, kind of looks like C.C. DeVille from Poison, right? And anyway, we start talking, whatever. And he grabs the guitar off the wall, and he just starts pulling off these crazy licks. He's got a cast on now. He can barely hold the pick, but he's doing finger tapping, and he's doing like arpeggios, sweep picking, and just like with a cast on. And I'm just like, just blown away by how well this guy played. I'm just like, dude, that is so awesome. I said, I can't wait I said, what happened? He told me what happened to his hand, how he broke it or whatever. And I'm just like, that must hurt like hell. He goes, oh, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. He says, it's almost healed up. The cast coming off in a week or so. And I'm like, wow. I said, take care of your hands. Because, but he was just like, just doing the Steve Vai stuff and all kinds of stuff like that. It was just like, and the guy, the way he, like when I'm like, wow, that was amazing. He's like, oh, thanks. It's, it's nothing, right? So, he's timid about, not timid, but like, like he knows he can play well. He knows he's really, really good, but he's like, he's humble about it, right? And that left an impression. I'm like, that is cool. That, it's like, okay, you got a broken hand and you're showing, like you're taking people to school. What I mean? Like, he took me and my buddy to school. So I was like, wow, how did you do that? And he showed us a couple of little things, you know, without pissing off the staff at the music store, right? Because it's like, you're not there for guitar lessons. You're there to post and buy stuff, right? But anyway, we talked for a little bit, and then when parted ways, never saw each other again. But I was just like, yeah, that's the kind of guitar player I want to be. Somebody who's like friendly. Uh, when like when somebody asks you how did you do that, you say, well, you start with this, and be constructive and stuff like that. And I think that's how you get a really good guitar player or good whatever drummer, singer, bass player, whatever. I think that's how you get it, is by that humbleness of, okay, well, let me invite you on how to do that. And then when you go onto stage, it kind of translates, where again, you're more about the performance than you are just showing off. Like, example, if you want to see two totally different mentalities of guitar playing, if you look at the Nightwish guitar player, Empu Vernon, I probably butchered his name. I love the way this guy plays. He is such a number one. I think he has an awesome live sound, but he's such a like tool to the job kind of guitar player. Meaning, he doesn't do anything more than is required. He gives everybody else. He's not trying to hog the limelight with the guitar. You know what I mean? Like, so he does a lot of stuff. If you listen to Nightwish stuff, there's a lot of guitar in it, but there's also a lot of keyboards, and everybody kind of has their part to play, and they play very musically together rather than like where if you were to listen to like Ingve, for example, it's very guitar focused, it's guitar centric, and that's good for Ingve. But like the keyboard player doesn't get the like the keyboard will never overpower Ingve. You know what I mean? Even though like you'll give them a spotlight here, a spotlight there, but it's like, no, you're here to see the riff, the riff god, right? Whereas with Empu, okay, like he's basically, whenever he has to play, he does his job and that's it. And he's a much better player than you would think, because he holds back a lot, but he plays for the song, not for here's the glory of the guitar, right? And stuff like that. Now, if you want to see the total opposite of that, it would be Vinnie Vincent. If you, yeah, Vinnie Vincent. If you ever saw, if you want to see a strange human being, there you go, Vinnie Vincent. But Vinnie Vincent would do this weird thing. They had him in Kiss for a little while, and Kiss kicked him out because he was kind of a weird guy. But he did Vinnie Vincent's Invasion, and Vinnie Vincent's Invasion had Mark Slaughter singing or whatever, who I've seen Slaughter live, and they were awesome. They were awesome. It was back in the '90s, but they were awesome. But Vinnie Vincent would do like 45-minute long guitar solos. So like the gig would be going, and then he'd start doing playing the song, and then he would just start doing these guitar solos that would go on and on and on and on, and it just like, it even got to the point where the audience would start leaving. Like, what I mean? Like, this guy just was weird that way, like kind of like, no, you're here to see me. You know what I mean? Just really, even Randy Rhoads. If you take Randy Rhoads, what a phenomenal showman. There, unfortunately, and I don't know why it worked out this way. If you think of like any other musician, famous guitar player, there's tons of footage. You go back like guitar players to the 1950s. Here's like the 100 shows of them, whatever. But Randy Rhoads, there's so little footage of Randy Rhoads. In comparison to so much. But whenever you see this guy play, he plays for the audience. Like like the things he would do to that poor Les Paul, it is amazing that guitar would even stay in tune. Like he must have broke that thing so many times, but he beat the shit out of that Les Paul, in the audience. But when he would do his guitar solo, the guitar solo that Randy Rhoads does is very short and sweet. Again, he played it every night, so that's why he was so good at it. But when you really listen to it, it's not. It's like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. That's it. And then the rest was just okay. What does a song need? Now with Randy, what was really cool was he could throw so much into a song because of his music theory. So whenever you would listen to like Children of the Grave or Mr. Crowley solo, like wow, you know what I mean? Crazy Train, obviously a legendary, legendary riffs, solos, the live stuff, the Suicide Solution, that solo right in the middle of that thing, that the first time I heard that, I was so blown away. I was just like, what the hell is that? Like I had to listen. I listened. This was on tape cassette, so it was stop, rewind, listen, stop, rewind, listen. I wore that section of the tape out. I had to buy another Randy Rhoads tribute tape because I wore that section out so bad that it wouldn't even play at that section. It just literally wore it out. But what a solo, right? Just it was, but then it goes right back into the song so seamlessly. And it's like if you were there, that must have been the most awesome performance. You know what I mean? Because the guy was a showman. He was basically there for the audience. So yeah, he got to do all the crazy wild stuff that he could do, but he knew when to turn it on, when to turn it off. And with Ozzy, what worked out well for him is that it turned it, it was it was a pedal to the metal most of the time, so he could get away with it. Uh, so yeah, when you're playing live, like if you're lucky and you're playing the type of music that gives you the spotlight, sure, great. But like if you're doing it just to impress other musicians, 9 times out of 10 you don't. And I think because a lot of musicians too are very, kind of like I say, self-conscious. So if you've ever met like somebody with a big ego, and it's weird how bands will pull like somebody who you know as a normal person day to day, they get on stage and it's a weird thing I've seen with some people where they stress out and then they become really bossy and like nothing is good enough or whatever. And I don't know what that is exactly, but it's just some people are like this. And I think that's where you get all these bizarre stories of rock stars like tossing chairs around and this is not good enough, this is not the soup I ordered, send it back kind of stuff. And then other musicians is like, hey, this guy, walks down the street shaking people's hands just because he's out walking his dog or whatever in public, like with the rest of the plebs. You know what I mean? And it's funny that you can get that difference and drastic difference in personalities on stage, but that thus is the human experience, right? But as a musician, if you're out there playing to have fun, playing to playing to the audience, so to speak, and giving the audience an experience. Like if you were in the audience, what would you want to see, kind of thing. And I think that's the best advice. Is if you went to a show, what would you want to see? Now, if you're the guy on stage and you were, what do you think the audience wants? Like if you were at that show that you're playing, what would you want to see? And I think if you go with that, it kind of takes away the, the nonsense of it, like where it's like, okay, now I can focus on just being the best entertainer I can be. I know my job well enough with my instrument that that's fine. But just really put out the show the way, whether you're doing a one-man band, just an acoustic guitar and you. I mean, for example, you can look at John Mayer play a song called Neon, where he's just sitting on a chair, bashing away on the acoustic guitar, singing the song, and just that little intro thing that he does is just it's marvelous. You know what I mean? Like it just shows raw talent, just beyond. But it's rhythmic. It sticks with the song. It primes people up for the main song, and then it just goes into it, and the crowd goes wild. You know what I mean? But what's he really doing? Okay, he gets the showboat, but what he's really doing is guiding you into the song and giving you that performance that you really want to see. And I think, like I say, if you're one of those people, because like I say, I've seen it so many times where it's like, okay, you play a place that's popular where there's a lot of musicians hanging out. You will sometimes get this cliquey kind of thing where, oh, this guitar player, he's not as good as that guitar player, or whatever. And it's like, I don't think people really care about that. It's usually the musicians that sit there and try to convince everybody else that the guy you're watching is no good to listen to. It's like a lot of times people don't listen to that guy. They're like, yeah, that guy's just jealous or something. You know what I mean? So never pay mind to that. Yeah, there might be some guys that are actually not that good a musician, but it depends on a lot of other things. Like sometimes it's not just about the shredding and stuff like that. Sometimes it's about how good of a like you could be an awesome musician without being technical. I mean, give you an example. The band Hole, okay, with Courtney Love, was never a big fan of the grunge thing, I gotta admit. But if you watch some of the live footage of stuff that she did, it was actually really well done in the context of, grunge music. Like they played really tight, they played really well, they got the crowd going, and you know what I mean? And yet, from a technical point of view, they suck. You know what I mean? Because it's grunge, right? Grunge is supposed to suck, but that's what makes it good. It sucks because it's simple, right? But sometimes, like I say, that three-chord rock stuff just it's all you need to do. You don't need to do any more than that. And then, on the other hand, if you are in one of those bands that is, especially like symphonic metal and stuff like that, even symphonic metal, I find is kind of like it's more about the theater than it is about the blistering riffs and stuff like that. Like people love the blistering riffs. I do. Not gonna lie to you. I think that's it's epic, right? But what is it you're into the mystery of the song, like what's it going to be, like what strange turns are going to take, like into time signatures, and it's going to go from melodic to like really hard vocals and then back to melodic again and then to something completely different. And then there's like a little bridge piece and an instrumental right in the middle of it. It's like, wow, this is an epic thing to listen to. That's why, like I say, bands like Nightwish and stuff like that have such big followings. It's just, they like they go all over the place. And then, of course, like I say, if you want to go to the extreme of like technical abilities, you go to like Polyphia, if I said the name right. Again, they're like you'll watch it and go, wow, that's interesting. But are their songs actually any good? That, like, to me it's like, okay, well, I like that, but would I listen to it more than once? Where if you wanted to see like a complete drastic 180 degree from each other, you could have like AC/DC and Polyphia opening. You know what I mean? Like you would not be able to match those two bands together. You know what I mean? But which band do you think you're going to enjoy more? You know what I mean? Like what band are you going to listen to over and over again? Probably AC/DC, right? Maybe some people like AC/DC, but you get the idea what I'm like, because it's very digestible, it's very easy. Bands somewhere in between, say like Judas Priest, where it's technical, but it's still more straightforward, old classic metal type stuff. Black Sabbath is a perfect example, where it's like everything Tony Iommi plays, even including the solos. Somebody who's been playing for a year to 2 years could probably play every Black Sabbath song. Black Sabbath is really, really easy stuff to play, but does it ever sound good? Like when you get like high gain on the SGs, my SGs, it's like, yeah, play War Pigs. I mean, it's just, yeah, like War Pigs is such a fun song to play live. If you've never played that song live, I highly suggest you play that song live. The crowd will go apeshit, especially at that little, like the middle of the song there, with just the drum going, you know, like it's like, but it's a simple song. But it's just you rock out to it, right? So you got these guys that play like Slayer and all that stuff, and they're like, or a Testament, like I mean, with like Alex Skolnick stuff. Like I mean, that stuff was pretty difficult to play. You had to work at it to play it. You know, it was like, especially the speed of it, right? Like that speed metal stuff is kind of one of those things that's hit and miss. If you get it right, it sounds awesome. If you get it wrong, you sound like trash, right? Because it's like you have to be so tight at it. But again, you know, like you play it, and if you don't play the technical stuff well, you sound really, really bad. If you play the simple stuff bad, nobody notices. You know what I mean? It's just like, again, it doesn't matter if you're playing Nirvana with you sound weird if your guitar's tuned. You know what I mean? Like it's like that's not how you. Why does that not sound like Smells Like Teen Spirit? It's like there's something wrong with the guitar. It sounds too good. You know, it's supposed to be out of tune. I mean, Kurt Cobain complained about you know, the music company, you know, executives making him basically keep his guitar slightly untuned. You know, because that was the thing. Was the idea was to make it as raw and, you know, garage bandish sounding and as amateur sounding as possible. And I understand why the companies would do that. The record companies would do this because, okay, you don't have to have a guy that's good at doing guitar solos because it's you know, three chord rock, right? And not only that, you don't have to have any vocal talents. So how many more people can you sign up if you can make grunge music the, you know, like a thing, right? Because you could sign up just about anybody because it's just like, okay, can we just get their image sold because they don't have to know how to play properly. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, like grunge is kind of like the bag of chips of music. You know what I mean? Like it's just here. Everybody likes a bag of chips. It's simple. It's not a good solid meal, but here you go. Here's your bag of chips. And that's one thing that like drove us guitar players that were trying so hard to do things like Eddie Van Halen or Paul Gilbert, or you know, like Paul Gilbert stuff is, like I say, that's like next level, like insanity, even by today's standards. Again, just look at some of the old Paul Gilbert Starlix videos. It's like just the shredding is just ferocious, and you're like, how does he do that without catching the fingerboard catching fire? Like he was a fast player, like ridiculous. Um, and again, when you ask Paul Gilbert how you know, like you get these guys like how many, like if you ask Slash how many hours did you play? Oh, I used to play like 6 8 hours of practicing every day. And then you'd ask Paul Gilbert, well, how many hours do you practice? Oh, maybe 10 15 minutes, half an hour a day. That's all I did. You know what I mean? Like, so Brent was talking about this in one of his videos that it's, you know, like playing for like 3 4 hours noodling around is not going to be as fruitful as playing for maybe 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever, with like a set practice, and you know, work on this technique, that technique, whatever. The way I do it is, if you want to get good at technique, you practice. If you want to get good at performing, you practice songs. And that's something I've noticed. So I break my practices up a little bit different. I only play maybe 5 10 minutes a day. That's it. And then once in a while, when I get the house to myself, I'll sit there with the acoustic guitar and play out a set, you know, a set or two, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, you know, when you get into it, whatever. But I really don't spend a lot of time on it. But usually what I do is try to find something challenging and get good at that, and then apply it into a song. So like learn a lick, a scale, or whatever it is, and then apply it into a song, so that if you are going to end up in like one of these, typically jam nights tend to go the blues route, you know, three chord rock kind of roots, just so that people can jam with each other without having to, you know, deal with like 15 different changes in the song, right? That's why you don't get like spontaneous thrash metal songs. You know what I mean? Like they pretty much have to be worked out, because the riffs involved, the time signatures, the key signature changes, all that stuff. So if you're, like I say, if you're playing on stage and you're in one of these places where you got these cliquey kind of judgmental guitar players sitting in front of you, pay them no mind. Just play for the people that are there for the music. Because if you're there for the music and they're there for the music, you guys are going to have a good time. So I don't care what you're playing, just play it well. Uh, One of my, I guess, I don't know, call him a cousin or uncle or whatever he was. Anyway, a guy named Gilbert that I bought my very first electric guitar from. He said something. He goes, it didn't, and he was a country blues player. More, nah, I wouldn't even call him a blues player. He was a country player. Country, maybe bluegrass, a little bit, but mostly old country. But he played a Stratocaster and stuff like that. And before that, he had a Stratocaster. He had the 1968 Harmony Rocket that I bought for him. And I remember him saying this to me one day because we used to talk about music and stuff like that. And he knew I was, young kid into rock and metal and stuff like that. And he said to me, he goes, it doesn't matter what you're playing. He goes, it could be blues, rock, classical, your heavy metal junk that you play, whatever. He goes, if people can't understand what you're playing, they're simply not going to listen. And I don't think a truer word has ever been. He always had these really good ways of explaining things, and it was always something simple like that. Like always play to the best of your ability, always, without exception. Never dog it. That's why, like I say, when I play live, I play sober because I can guarantee you will enjoy the sober. What you get when you play sober is you get to take in the entire performance, and you get to see the audience take it in. And that will be to me what it does is it like it puts the whole performance on another level. So even if I play bad that night or whatever, because sometimes like especially with the jam nights, you go on stage and whatever's there, that's what you use, and you just make it work, right? But when you're on stage and you got the whole okay, you've been booked for the night, and you're playing the whole show yourself, and you get past the three songs of tweaking the PA and whatever, getting things working. You get up there and you play, and you really take it in. You know what I mean? Because you have nothing dulling your senses whatsoever. It's like, oh yeah, I like to get a little buzz going when I get on stage. No, trust me, you don't need that. You really don't need that, because you will get much more of a high when you're sober, because you're just going to really experience the song purely and the music and stuff like that. But you're going to, with the audience and everything, like I don't know if I'm putting it into words well enough here, but what I'm telling you is try it. Like, even if you're a nervous person, whatever, trust me, at one point you become very comfortable being sober on stage, and when you do, you watch what you do. Just watch, like film it. Magic happens because your brain works faster. Like there's nothing slowing you down. Your brain works faster. You get ideas on the spot, and sometimes the most spontaneous improvisation can make a performance a whole new dimension. And I've had that happen a few times on stage, and it's magical. It really is. Not to get too melodramatic about it, but yeah, it's kind of magical. So yeah, whether you're a noob on stage or whatever, like I say, I remember watching enough people in jam nights and stuff like that their first time on stage, and they're new musicians, so they're going to be sloppy. They're going to forget words. They're going to have all kinds of problems like that. But you watch them a couple of weeks later, they're still playing the same song for the next 10 weeks or 15 weeks or whatever, or even year. But then they eventually get better at it, and you could see their improvements, right? And that's always very cool. And when you do see that, go let them know. Say, hey, you're improving really well. Good job. And oh, okay, no, it's that phone rang. I thought it was for me. But yeah, so it's neat to see people like become comfortable playing live, and it doesn't matter whether they're in a band or if they're a one-man band or whatever. it really will, one of those things that if you're into the performance first, like I say, when you're jamming in your room, you're a musician first. When you're learning stuff, you're a musician first. When you're in the studio, you're a musician first. But when you're on stage, you're an entertainer first. And if you view it like that, it's gonna, you know, do a lot of things. Now, sometimes you're in bands that don't want to be do too many, crazy things. Moving around on stage, certain ways and stuff like that. I tend to be a quite hyper guy on stage if I can be. If I can get away with it. Yes, I go over the top because the audience responds to over the top sometimes. But sometimes you gotta kind of dial it back too. Um, so like over the top sometimes. If you know how to pull it off, it just works really well. For me, I like doing theatrics on stage. So especially as a one man band, one thing I like doing is telling like some sort of story, almost poetic like story, and then going into a song, like priming people up for the song, and it makes it a new experience for them, right? And sometimes like like musicians will get on stage and they'll just stand there, turn around, stare at their amps and stuff like that. Like I get people that are nervous and stuff like that, and they'll play really well, but there's like no life in the band whatsoever. Like there's just nothing going on. It's just guys playing music, and they're just standing there. And that's fine. But if you had to watch that for 2 hours, you know what I mean? Like you're getting gypped. You know what I mean? Like you want to see some movement on stage. You want to see some interaction between the band and the audience. And I've had many compliments on this. Is that my stage presence, according to one chick, a really good singer too. I wish I could do some projects with her. She's like, your stage presence is awesome. Yeah, she's like, you always have something interesting. It's like, what's he gonna do next, kind of thing. And I'm like, like that's a great compliment. That makes you feel good. And I've even had people say like, oh, your style of music is definitely not the music I listen to. Putting it politely, but you do it well. You know what I mean? And that's still a compliment. You know what I mean? Uh, you might get the, oh, that guy sucks, whatever. You will get the odd person that will do that. Don't take that to heart, because like sometimes people are just like that too, and they truly don't like you, and they're but these are usually type of people that they're like that with everybody they know, where it's just like you know they have to insult you to bring you down, whatever. Like there are people like that. I don't know why there's people like that, but there are people like that. And hang on, ooh, excuse me, sorry. So for as many people like that that you get, like, don't take that stuff to heart. If you go up there and you give it your all, and you can analyze, especially if you record yourself live, you'll pick out things that you do right, things that you do wrong, and there's always stuff to correct that you do, especially live. You're going to do things that you probably didn't realize you were doing. Um, so that, but one thing about filming yourself live is that you can correct a lot of stuff when you're aware of it. When you're not aware of it, like maybe you do the same scream, or whatever, the same woo woos all the time. Maybe do the same lick over and over again, and that's a common one for the blues guys, is they all play that same 12th fret G string thing that Carlos Santana does. They always end up there, doing some sort of pentatonic riff, and then do the Chuck Berry riff, pentatonic thing, and then end right back there, right? You all know the riff I'm talking about. The Chuck Berry riff is kind of like, I use it. It sounds great. Everybody uses it, but sometimes 10 solos in a row using that same riff can get a little bit. I mean, like, again, Angus Young pulls it off. And again, he's a little more popular than I am. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe he's doing something right. You know what I mean. So who am I to criticize, right? Obviously I'm not criticizing because again, sometimes you get known for that, right? But yeah, whatever you play, however you play, you know, play for the people that you know are going to enjoy it. The critics are usually people that, like, unless you really really suck, and you have to be pretty bad to suck, like, trust me, you have to be pretty bad to get the audience to boo. I'm not saying everybody gets participation awards, but what I'm saying is that a lot of times, like, people understand that, okay, it's your first few times on stage, you have to be pretty bad before people will walk away. You know what I mean? And there are people that are really really bad at being a musician, but you can always improve. But if you're not too bad and whatever, you're going to usually get a fairly decent response from the audience. So again, the nervousness and stuff like that, I don't get nervous on stage, but I get overexcited. And one of the big things I always found, and I'm still bad at it, is I always play way too fast. I always start a song way too fast. If I could give one tip, just the one tip, to any musician when you play live, whether it's with acoustic or band, count yourselves in, and count yourselves in at the proper tempo, because that is such a key, especially for the singer. If you're not the guy singing and you start the song too fast, you're going to wind your singer really really fast, and playing too fast is always a big problem, uh, because a lot of times, like, the song is, even the fast songs you're playing those too fast. uh, you gotta get that, because the more relaxed you sound, the better anyway. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it at about that. So that's just I thought an interesting topic for today. So if you'd like to support the channel, all links are down below to do so. Thank you so much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day.